Hello, everyone. This is Ninadri, President of Green Computing Foundation. Today, we have with us some of our advisory board members to discuss about the recently launched Sustainable IT Insight Survey report. To start with, I would request the panelists to introduce themselves in a minute. And to start with, let us have Matt Williams to introduce himself.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Matt Williams. I am based out of Colorado and am the founder of Making Software Greener and kicked off the Sustainable IT Manifesto. I'm pleased and honored to be here today and share some understanding while we're speaking about the Green Computing Foundation's recent survey that I feel is very important. Thank you.
Archana?
Hello, everyone. My name is Archana Joshi, based here in Pune, India. I am one of the advisory board members for the Green Computing Foundation. Along with that, about 24 years in IT services across various roles. And of late, I have been involved not just in sustainable IT, but also on AI. And that's kind of an interesting take to look at how AI as well as sustainable IT comes together. Very excited to share some insights today around the survey that Dr. Niladri referred to. Thank you.
Thank you. Naresh?
Good evening, good morning. My name is Naresh. I am part of the Infosys Quality and Productivity team. And here in the capacity of the advisory board member, I run lean automation engineering excellence for Infosys. And in that process, bringing in new technologies, new frameworks, into the happening with AI on the cloud, right? The concerns on sustainability, sustainable IT practices are something that perhaps touch all of us, and in perhaps the biggest way that you can imagine. So the survey has been something of an eye-opener. Some things were on expected lines, while some things were not on expected lines. So over the next 40-45 minutes, I look forward to hear from my co-panelists and also discuss and deliberate and share some of the insights that I sort of found and observed on this.
Thank you, Naresh. So let us start off with the first question, and we will start with Naresh and then to Archana and then to Matt. And the question remains the same for all of you. That is, give your short comment on the Sustainable IT Survey report after you have gone through it. And all of you have also reviewed it, so you know much more on that. So to start with Naresh.
Sure. So a very quick, sort of summary, right? What I found, what I liked about the report very clearly was the fact that it highlighted the importance of energy efficiency, right? The usage of hardware in a certain way that brings in that level of efficiency. We did touch upon the adoption of cloud services. There was some significant insights coming on e-waste management, green procurement, and integrating it into the overall operations for an organization, right? So these were some of the key areas that I found as highlights. And while I felt the implementation of some of the sustainable practices across the industry was a little more widespread, at least the survey sort of very clearly identified that that was not the case, and there still are challenges, and the implementation of some of these practices, I wouldn't even call them best practices, but just practices for sustainable IT, remains something that perhaps will improve over the next few years. So which sort of brings to the critical recommendations, right? Which very clearly perhaps start now with just how do we enhance a lot more awareness how do we dumb down maybe the implementation elements, the approaches that are required to drive sustainable IT practices for a much, much more greener tech future for all of us, right? So this is a quick summary, Niladri and the team that I wanted to share.
Sure. Thanks, Naresh. Archana?
I would probably say two things about the survey when I read the survey a while back. The first, very much needed. It is truly the need of the hour. Looking at how much investments all the industries are doing in technology, so much needed. And thank you to Green Computing Foundation for taking a step towards that. And the second piece, which I would say kind of struck me, is the aspect that the survey is what I call as holistic. And let me elaborate what I mean by that. If you look at the survey, and I would encourage all our listeners who haven't already gone through it to please visit the site and look through that. There are 4 key aspects which stand out clearly. The first and the foremost is, of course, what we call as the software part of it, which means how my code, how my tests, what is the kind of software I write impacts the complete sustainability IT ecosystem. So that's one angle. The second angle is what I call the compute angle or the hardware angle, where your data centers, your servers, your cloud, your ability to make sure all those run in an energy efficient manner comes out clearly. And of course, views of different respondents onto how they see sustainable practices getting imbibed into the compute angle of it. The third piece, which I call, is the part which is most crucial and important, that while we may have these kind of surveys and these kind of awareness, it's not going to be put in practice unless the people angle is addressed and people embrace it. So the third part which is there is the people part, which is covered as well in terms of roles, awareness, so on and so forth. And the fourth part, which is what I call as the governance part, which is all about your KPIs and vendor management and procurement, right? So what kind of struck me when I was reviewing it, going through both the questions and later on when the survey results came out, was the part that it's trying to look at the holistic angle of making sure that the entire ecosystem in the IT is addressed. And I would say that is one of the key points for me, because I don't need to run around to figure out what is the impact of what where. In one single report, I at least get a broad overview of how things span out across different areas. That's what I would say, Niladri.
Thank you. Yes, Matt.
So I feel that this survey is very, very important because it's been said, if you don't measure something, you really don't truly know it. So the fact that we are making efforts to measure where the industry is at the moment, I think is very valuable. The global scale of it also is valuable insofar as differing parts of the world have a different focus on sustainable IT. And as such, this being a global survey, we get a better feel for where the industry is at a whole across the world. That said, there were things that definitely aligned with my experience, such as there is an awareness issue. As I mentioned earlier, I'm in Colorado at this point in the US, and sustainability and sustainable practices are very important in the area that I'm living. However, speaking with people in IT, there is not the awareness of how their particular practices and procedures can affect sustainability. So I feel that awareness, again, is a very large portion of where we need to focus. Also, too, there really aren't good tools at the moment. There really aren't good methodologies and practices that have been defined. And although various governments have introduced a reporting requirement, there really isn't much documentation on what needs to actually be reported on. There aren't standards. And so these three areas are ones that I think that in order to encourage and promote the adoption of sustainability in IT need to be focused on. Not to say that the others are not important, but from a foundation standpoint, I think that as we add in these pieces, the other pieces will come. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. I think all of you gave quite some interesting and important points. And yes, awareness is very, very low at this point of time as we see, as we proceed. And as you also said that there is no prescriptive scenario from any regulators to do certain things. And today itself, I was talking to somebody in the insurance area in India. And in India, IRDA basically takes care of those guidelines. And they have just said that insurance companies should create certain risk management framework from the risk management from the point of view of climate risk management framework. That's it, and left it there. So there is nothing more to it. But what is important to note there is that there is a need for integrating sustainability in the board itself, in the overall corporate governance, in the overall corporate risk management. And if we see the report, we saw that only 42% said that they have sustainable IT strategy formal, but I am sure that the next points doesn't correlate with it, because 42% if it is there, I have a hunch because of the other points is that they are talking about sustainability, not sustainable IT. Because when you go to the next point, that whether the trainings has been done, it's at low as 23%. If you look at presence of sustainable IT managers, it is 40% saying that they have or plan to appoint. It's plan to appoint is more kind of scenario. So 40% is there, 60% have nothing to do with it. And if you look at reporting of sustainable IT improvements to the CXO, that kind of a dashboard again is not there. It's only 36% gives some value. 40 more than around 44% is not doing anything. So from that point of view, my next question, because all of you are interacting with a customer, what do you think in your experience with your organization and with your customer organizations, that how do you see sustainable IT strategy being there and implemented, and whether there is specific senior medium management role specific to sustainable IT, not sustainability? These are 2 points, and obviously the point of about the reporting to those board or to the CXOs on sustainable IT. What do you think? Is it there? How it is? Your experience. So let us start with Archana now, and then we'll go to the others.
What I would say is, like any other technology adoption, where you see certain laggards and certain leaders, this is also no different, right? But what saddens me is the fact that leaders are few, laggards are more. So we need to move where laggards need to catch up very, very quickly. And what would differentiate between a leader and laggard? Let me elaborate on that as well, right? So who are the leaders? Leaders are the folks who don't just have somebody who is a chief sustainable officer, but the chief sustainability officer has a team, which is a technology team, which works closely with him or her, which means that they have somebody who will be helping to create their reports and draw all the insights from the data points that get collected. They work with different units in an organization to look at what their sustainability scores are and how those can be reduced. So that means that if I'm a bank, that person will work with a bank's CIO office or a CTO office to look at what is the CIO, CTO contributing to the sustainability and what can be done. Similarly, if that person is in a tech industry like I am, then they would be working with different units within the technology division and working towards to make sure that happens. The third part, which is setting the leaders apart from the laggards, is there's an appreciation that technology is the future ahead, and hence we should invest right at the start of technology design to make sure it doesn't make matters worse from a sustainability standpoint, right? Which means responsible use of technology is also one of the angles that the leaders look at. Now, if I look at these three things, which means a dedicated team who is working with your chief sustainability officer, dedicated folks who work with the CIO or the CTO org to make sure they meet the norms which are set down. Along with that, an appreciation that technology should reduce its footprint. It means that these leaders truly have inculcated sustainability as one of their core strategy focus areas. Whereas if you now shift to the right end of the spectrums, which are the laggards, there you will see questions getting asked, is sustainability even a cause of concern for IT? I thought that that helps, but does not contribute. Or questions getting asked saying that I'm doing ESG reporting using IT tools, my job is done. What more do I need to do, right? Or just getting started on this journey where they are thinking about their architects and others getting aware of sustainable and green IT practices, right? Now, that's what the thing is. And if I look at it, as I said at start of my answer to this question, leaders are far and few and laggards are more. And I would love to see during the next year or two that the shift starts happening towards the leaders. And what will encourage that to happen is when leaders start talking about this. Today, not many organizations are even talking. They might be doing things, but are they going out in the open and saying they are doing all of these things from a technology standpoint? Perhaps not. They do talk about the sustainability, broader things, but somewhere that sustainable technology gets hidden in the broader agenda. And I think there's a need for these leading organizations to come out and speak a lot more about it. Is what I feel where the momentum will start to get built.
Thanks, Naresh.
Sure. Now, agree on the three elements that Archana mentioned, but I do want to add a couple of points. One, I think it starts with the vision, in my view, right? If you're driven by a clear vision of how you want to look at sustainability or ESG for that matter, right? As a clear catalyst for positive change, it sort of follows from there, right? And then, are you connecting it with your purpose? Because employees, right, your team, leaders within the organization sort of see through these gaps, right? If your vision, the purpose for the company, right, if they are not connected and they are not something that sort of in some ways become a catalyst for a positive change in the world around you, your ecosystem, then clearly you will find these gaps, right? And I think what Archana mentioned with respect to the other extreme, right, where people are found wanting, very likely, there is a lack of vision, clarity, and alignment around your purpose, vision, etc. That is one. Second, it's very important from a sustainable IT perspective to actually look at, what's your sort of long-standing commitment to stay ahead of the curve, right? With respect to governance, with respect to your overall responsibility and transparency. And, very recently, right, Infosys was, I think, the first company globally to be ISO 42K certified. This is an international standard with respect to AI. Essentially provides a very structured benchmark. It's designed for entities which are working on AI-based products or services to ensure that you are making use of all of this in a responsible manner, right? Whether it is developing AI systems or consuming and using AI systems. Now, this becomes important, and that's the reason I was sort of touching upon the aspect of commitment and alignment, right? So organizations that are clearly having a vision to drive a positive change in the world and the ecosystem around them, the purpose aligns accordingly with whether it is people, businesses, or communities. It makes it easier to then have the rest of the team rally around what you are doing, right? And whether it is sustainable IT or the larger ESG related goals and approaches, that becomes very important. The second element clearly is, with respect to having these policies and approaches in place. And a lot of times, this is a struggle, largely because of sponsorship. And second, also because at times, it is oversimplified to say, look, if I report some, metrics, or if I create a report, right, I am there. So it sort of becomes a reporting game versus driving practices, which actually make a clear difference, right? So that's a second element, right? Sponsorship, and then the approaches that are taken to sort of drive compliance, etc., right? Which shouldn't be a reporting related thing alone. The third thing is, how holistically you want to look at this, right? Now, are you demonstrating your purpose in action? Like I said, versus just, creating some report once in a while. So now that requires you to look at things holistically, right? The values and ethics in the company, right? What kind of diversity you drive, correct? What kind of campuses and buildings you actually have? Are they sustainable, right? Etc. What kind of practices putting in place towards being carbon neutral, right? And looking at this across your global operations, and which then brings you to scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, right? What are the mechanisms you are putting in place for data, right? All of this. Now, all of this requires clear-cut investments, right? And they will not come unless this is part and parcel of your larger strategy. So having the strategic intent around this becomes that much more critical. And then the rest of the alignment, Niladri and team, right? I think it's easy to drive in my.
Sure. Thanks, Naresh. Matt?
So I am seeing a great difference in approaches depending on the size of the organization. So larger organizations oftentimes do have someone in the role of sustainability officer, or they have some sort of sustainability initiative, whether it is fully fledged or how it is implemented, of course, varies from organization to organization. But I'm not really seeing this in the SMB area, small to medium business, or the startups. There are startups who are focused on sustainability, and unfortunately, they are hyper-focused on their small niche for their product. They don't either have the resources or don't take the time to also look at how they affect sustainability. So in a lot of organizations that don't have a sustainability officer, there may be individuals, engineers, what have you, who are interested in sustainability, but they don't feel enabled or empowered to do anything about it. And I think that these are also areas that we need to focus. And while the larger organizations may have a large amount of visibility and can help drive some of the discussion and awareness of sustainability, in terms of footprint, I would argue that they are far outweighed by the small to medium businesses, by the startups as well. So I think that we need a broader approach. While yes, the larger companies are important, we also need to have the ability and the focus to work with the smaller organizations, because there are so many more of them. And I think that if we have a broader range, then ultimately we will be more successful in driving understanding and sustainability within IT.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, some of the points we also see that how it has come out in the report. As you saw, that not many we saw as having specific sustainable ID rules. We did not find anything at the project level at all. Somebody given the responsibility of taking care of sustainability in the project level itself, starting top to bottom, where you are talking about the integration of the strategy to execution. That is not there. And we also see that funding is an issue. There is no specific budget for sustainable IT. There might be some budget for the sustainability because a lot of the bigger organizations are now have some mandates from regulatory authorities or customers or so on. But for the others, it's not there. So the focus or in terms of the strategy, the vision, as Naresh said, as Archana said, and you mentioned about the bigger organizations still having something to do with it, but the next second tier, third tier doesn't have, and startup definitely not, because they do not see how the sustainable IT is going to help them in their regular business approach. And one of the things that we also have to see is that it's not about the IT companies. Because we are talking about sustainable IT, suddenly people feels that it's IT's responsibility. But if you see, there are banks, insurances where typically 45-50% of their carbon footprint comes only from IT, not from anything else. So if they do not focus on the IT part of it, they will be losing out. And most of the countries today are coming out with the requirement that at least max by 2028, everybody has to disclose scope 3 emission, right? So, I mean, as we go forward, we see that. Now let us come to the next point, which we see is quite interesting, because this is a question which we had: strategy followed by organizations to embed sustainable IT best practices. And there we had specifically talked about something like cross-functional IT and energy efficient infrastructure, data management and resource optimization, innovation and prioritization, KPI by design. What we saw is that the figures that came, they have talked about like 21% is on the cross-functional IT and collaboration. IT collaboration and investing in energy efficient infrastructure. 21% we saw on data management and resource optimization. But if you really look at these two figures are the traditional normal operations work. So people are anyway doing it, but are they really doing it from the point of view of sustainable IT? May not be, but which are very specific, like innovation and prioritization on the basis of sustainability, KPI by design for sustainability. There we find less than 20%, that is 17%, 14% kind of a figure. So my next question to all of you again would be that what do you see in terms of actual implementation on the ground, are they really looking at it from the sustainability point of view, sustainable IT point of view, or are they looking at the various other aspects like the DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE, VSM kind of thing, even though doing that properly helps in sustainability? But are the people thinking in terms of sustainability or implementing things which are what they do on a regular basis? So I will start with Naresh now.
Sure. So Niladri, I think it's a mixed bag, right? And the report very clearly you know, articulates that. And like I said, right, some things, and this is one of those things, right? So clearly, wherever the organizations have put a structured, right, a top-down approach in place, you will find that awareness around these things, right, the ability to actually drive change at the ground level is much, much better. Now, wherever this is not a top-down thing, which is part of the core strategy of the organization, you will find this in pockets, correct? And I also want to sort of step back and say, right, because these are not easy things to do, right? If you need to actually measure what you need to measure, if you need to look at collection of data strategically, right, across so many work streams that you have in an organization, and even if it's a mid-sized or a small organization, it's not going to be easy. So people will take time to put these systems in place to be able to actually have the framework working at scale, right? So that's a difficulty. The third thing, clearly, I think, and it's very clear that people do not necessarily know how to approach, how to go ahead, what to do, right? And within Infosys over the past few years in our journey, right, towards being carbon neutral, now 5th year, right, we'll be carbon neutral. I have seen the change, right? And just making everybody aware, doing trainings, right, ensuring that everybody is enabled on and empowered on thinking about these aspects, I feel has made a big difference. And to your point, right, are you doing DevSecOps because you are supposed to do DevSecOps, or are you doing DevSecOps in addition with the lens of, are you bringing in an element of sustainable IT practices into it, right? And what I have seen is a difference that a team which is aware, empowered, enabled, has gone through some amount of handholding, training, understands the impact that each of their actions makes. You don't have to tell them that, look at it from the sustainability angle. They start to bring in those practices and do it, right? Versus another team, right, which doesn't know this, which doesn't know what impact it joined from outside. I remember during the training, right, when they were told that, look, you using your laptop for X number of hours in a day causes this kind of an impact, right? Was a revolution for many of them, right? They did not know this. So just knowing, right, the resources that you're consuming, what can you do to be optimal? I think just that awareness helps in a big way. So that's a difference between being aware, empowered, enabled versus not being aware, not being. And I go back to my point of, having the top-down sponsorship and the vision around this makes a huge difference, right? Investments become easy. There is a lot more appreciation for people who actually take the leadership on this, right, and become the champions. It makes it easier for you to then view some of this into your larger organization strategy, correct? And I think that is perhaps the starting point, right? For companies starting out, start with the vision, start top down, right? Align with your and take things forward.
Sure. Good points. Archana? Yes.
Okay. Um, What I would say is, and many of the listeners, panelists may be aware of it, but in spite of sounding like a broken record, I would say any transformation typically has those 3 steps, right? And we say Shuhari, which is knowing, doing, being. Today, if you look from a sustainability standpoint, many of them are just starting in that knowing stage. Forget the doing and being, right? They're still not there. Some of the leaders may be there marginally in the doing stage, but is sustainability as a thinking by default embedded in every single thing, which is the being stage, right? Is that today there? No. Do we need to get there? Absolutely, yes. But to do that, do we need structured interventions? It could be structured intervention in terms of the sponsorship that Naresh said, structured intervention as part of a checklist to say, have you thought about making a software decision, not just based on cost and annual maintenance and how the standing is in the industry, but also from a sustainability standpoint. So that could be a structured intervention. Structured intervention to have the typical carrot and stick approach, saying that, okay, if you go below certain things that affects certain, I'm not saying your pay or anything, but it has certain repercussions, right? So if I look from a transformation standpoint, if I say that Shuhari are those 3 stages, and today if we are at that level of initial level of Shu, which is the knowing level, ability of people to invariably by default think of sustainability is still not there. It's a long way to go. So to do that, we have to make sure that the awareness and all is brought in, interventions are brought in, and not just interventions, making sure that there is an acceptance or an understanding of the impact is brought in. Because also there is a saying which says that if you tell me what is in it for me, it's high chances that I will adopt. Now, from a sustainability standpoint, I've always seen that when we talk about what is in it for me, we don't necessarily talk about what is in it for me as that individual. We talk about what is in it for the earth. Moment that happens, you are setting up a distance between the person, because earth is a big old thing, big overwhelming thing for that person to understand. But what is in it for the person as an individual is very, very important to be addressed. And I think the sooner we are able to articulate that in a fashion which addresses different personas within an IT industry, that acceptability would be better. Because otherwise, every time you go and speak to them, their thing is, I will do sustainability, but it's for betterment of earth, which is a very abstract, overwhelming thing for somebody to appreciate. But if you tell them, hey, if you do this, the chances that your children go in a better school later on and can be able to do this, or your AC bill, your electricity bill in your house is going to reduce, or things like, if you do this well, the way you have architected your code will be better, and hence chances that somebody will say that tech debt is increasing will be less, and hence you will get much better appreciated in your company. When you start talking that, you're talking about what is in it for them as a persona. So I think the broader sustainability community needs to also bridge this gap. And the onus is not just on those who are implementing it. Onus is equally on the community like ours to say that how we can bridge this gap so that the acceptability improves and the Shuhari stages doesn't become year-long and years of journey, but a couple of months for an organization. That's what I would say.
Great. So, Matt, your thoughts?
I would definitely also mention the what's in it for me. I'm hearing a lot of that when talking to different organizations. I think that in terms of focus from, as Dr. Chaudhry asked before, for DevOps, for DevSecOps, for all those groups, they don't have a focus. They don't have it on the radar. What they are doing, whether they realize it or not, as they're taking care of tech debt, as they're measuring things, those can impact sustainability. but they're not doing it from a sustainability focus. I think that, and unfortunately, it goes back to the what's in it for me. A lot of what's going to be drivers for sustainability are external pressure, such as regulatory requirements, but also movements like FinOps, where they are taking some of the ideas of DevOps, such as measuring things and knowing where their spend is. From that, it appears that there might be a driver to at least start focusing to some degree on sustainability initiatives within organizations. Again, it's not sustainability for the sake of sustainability. It's sustainability to reduce costs. As Archana mentioned, when you talk about saving the planet, people don't really have an incentive because it's not something that they are seeing themselves. One of the things that we're seeing here in the US is stress being put on the electrical grid by things such as Bitcoin, by things such as AI, and different organizations are scrambling to try to ensure the security and stability of the grid. Unfortunately, they're looking at coal and other things because it's impacting now. And so as we can start to explain some of those stories of, these are impacts of sustainability that are affecting you now, and this is how it's going to continue to affect you, then I think that we will get more buy-in and more acceptance by individuals. Because while, yes, we need leadership, unless individuals see something that's in it for them, they're just going to do it because, well, here's the requirement from management. And they themselves won't do, perhaps they might do the bare bone due diligence, but they won't actually be diligent in looking for ways to improve at a organizational level on their sustainability. Thank you.
Right. So we have many other questions. I mean, we cannot go through all the questions in the report, but there has been many questions on the software development side, on the architecture side, and everywhere what we see is that it's nearly in the less than 21, 22%, less than that is what people are doing. And there's a huge amount of 80 or more percent who still needs to pick up on things. That is true. And again, the question again, back to my starting question was of the strategy. So if the strategy is not there, then down the line, seeing that value from the top level doesn't happen. And as Naresh says, that this is a top-down approach which is required. It cannot be a bottom-up approach to go to the extent that we want it to go. And as Archana again said, that it is about people realizing why it is important. And even if you look at if we talk about sustainability, we are talking about sustainability of the organization. And if you see the newer things that are coming up, I got the opportunity to look at the RBI's, the Reserve Bank of India's circular, and it has clearly mentioned in the circular that organizations need to look at IFRS S1, S2. And IFRS S1, S2 is made in such a manner to look at the double materiality in terms of the accounting, that how is there a financial impact due to climate and how you are impacting the climate, the environment, both comes in together. And what is that financial impact with respect to that? And if you look at IASB 5000 series that is supposed to come up, now it is still in the draft stage, is that the auditors are supposed to now look at that. So organizations have to start looking at it, saying that, yes, this is helping my organization in improving sustainability of the organization itself. ESG is not something separate. Sustainability is not something separate from the business by itself. The question is, what will AI and everything do if the data centers itself do not have power to do anything? I mean, we already saw the Google and the Microsoft data centers which crashed because of the external heat was so much that internal cooling couldn't handle it. So those are kind of impacts that people have to start realizing, and we also have to do a good job of talking about it, not just talking about look from the point of view of the earth. And earth is too big. There are too many people to take care of it. Why do I have to do anything about it? That's really true. And that brings one more point, which is our tools. We need to understand where we are today to go or take steps to reach what we target. As per you, do you see, I think one of you have already commented about it, but I would like an explanation to see that what you see in your experience, the tools that are currently available to capture the sustainability related information, mainly in terms of your carbon emission, which is both the embodied and the normal and the embodied carbon. That is, what is the usage carbon emission and what is the carbon emission in terms of its creation and transportation. Second, in terms of circularity, that is increasing the lifespan kind of thing. Third is in terms of e-waste, and fourth is in terms of the water usage. Now, in capturing those information to understand where we are, what we are doing, how can we improve? Because if we don't know where we are, we cannot take care of what we need to improve. So from that point of view, what do you see is happening and what do you feel is the area that will help everyone to do things better? So we'll start with Matt.
So at this point, I am seeing that while individual groups within an organization, whether it be, the heating and cooling, the infrastructure side of things, whether it be the software side of things, or measuring traffic, measuring disk space, and so forth, and resource utilization, while each individual project, each individual group may have some of the metrics, there is no sharing of them across the board. There's no correlation. There's no way of seeing the impact that a particular project might have, that a particular data center might have. They might understand, okay, here's our water utilization, or here is our power bill, but actually being able to make sense of those in a holistic sense isn't happening.
Right. Archana?
I kind of echo the comments that Matt gave, right? Many tools exist. Many organizations attempt to use them. Every tool produces certain results. How those results relate to each other, it's left to interpretation and trial and error. So that's where it is. So a lot to be done from a tool standpoint for sure.
Sure. Naresh?
Yeah. So like Matt and Archana said, yeah, there are tools, right? But what frankly I have found is that some of them are not adequate. Not adequate in the elements of being able to scale them, right? Sometimes they may not be adequate to measure things across, right? Versus just doing something very narrow. So at Infosys, we had to actually build some of these out, correct? Second, Matt hit upon a very, very critical element, which is, distinguishing and moving from a maturity standpoint to saying, yes, there is data, there is information, right? To there are insights, and then I'm using those insights to make decisions, right? in some areas, we have been able to actually bring some level of autonomous aspects to it, right? Which means the systems are, looking at data, learning, and then taking actions, which is very good because in that sense, right, you're taking away the human element, right, where it could be error prone. Sometimes, the humans may not act in time, etc. So making systems autonomous has helped, right, in several areas. The other thing which has helped is, to be able to bring all of this together on, I wouldn't say a single platform, but unified systems, right, where you have the ability to correlate, look at these insights, look at them holistically versus, looking at each data point separately. Once you bring those things together, I think you are in a much, much better position to drive very meaningful and relevant actions and change on the ground. So that's the third part. And the fourth thing is on the software side, Niladri, right? I mean, we have the mechanisms today to measure, right, how well designed my applications are, right? What kind of footprint will they leave behind in production, right? When you are actually running them at a certain scale. So you can model this out. And that actually is helping the teams to make the right decisions early on, right? So right at the design time, you can take certain steps. While you are developing, you can take certain steps to rein in, right? Otherwise, back in the day, you would hit production and much later you would actually figure out that, your application footprint, the choice of tech, right? The frameworks you've used are actually not as efficient, right? They are doing the job functionally, right? The functional features, all of them are working very well, right? The users are happy, but in the back end, you're actually leaving a much, much larger footprint. So tools of that nature also help now. And today with the tech, right, it's much more easier to actually leverage these tools and, use them effectively.
Sure. My experience here is that, I would look at it in a couple of ways. First thing is that if you look at any organization, they need to capture whatever the data is. And I'm looking at not just the IT related fact, I'm talking about everything. And what I see is organizations are not willing to spend on the tool. Even if it is like a reporting tool, it is not willing to spend. If it is because they feel that if I have to spend like 50K, what is the return that I get out of it? That they don't understand, so they don't want to spend. Second, in IT specifically, there are too many elements. So having one single tool with by the click of a button, getting everything becomes difficult. So there has to be some effort put, like as Naresh said, to build up certain things and integrate the others together to get it done. So that again is something which not everybody is doing it. So yes, there's a long way to go even for the tools perspective. And I think we are near time, so I would ask one more question to everyone. I'll start with Archana because she also has to drop off. Everybody. Is that as a closing statement, you have also seen the report has a section which is recommendations. So would you like to give a couple of points on the recommendations for the viewers to get some idea about it?
I would say one and only one recommendation if they can do is please get everybody in your organization trained and aware on impact that a technology can have on your environment. I think even if we start with that achievement, others will start to fall in place.
Right. Thanks. Naresh?
Yeah, no, completely agree, echo what Archana has said. I would say, is there a way for you to look at, and every organization is different, right? Everybody understands what works, what doesn't in their organization context, right? So what are the best ways to embed sustainability, sustainable IT practices into your organization's culture? And if that means training, awareness, if that means driving a very clear top-down agenda, right? If that means bringing in some amount of consulting effort to kickstart, right? I mean, whatever works in your organization. But I think the fundamental thing for me is how do you embed this into your organization culture? Because that is how it will remain over a longer period of time. That's how it will actually sustain itself in terms of the practices, the approach that you put in place, right? So I would say that is the key recommendation.
Thanks. Matt?
I would agree with both in terms of education and also culture, because if you don't have education, then you just don't know about the situation and you have no awareness. And unless it is embraced culturally, then it's not going to be effective. Where I see an issue is we're still missing the training. We're still missing the actual implementation of how do we go about educating people. You know, we're missing frameworks for how does an organization XYZ of this size, with these characteristics, how might they go about implementing a strategy for sustainable IT? So I don't see that we have the pieces that we need. We've identified that this is ultimately what we need, but it's like, okay, this is what we need. This is where we're going to end up. And that whole middle piece is missing. I think that that's something where there are a lot of opportunities for organizations to make an impact and make a difference. And that, I think, is one of the areas where the Green Computing Foundation is making an impact and is also making change, fostering change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And for the listeners, please download the report, go through it. If you have any questions, connect with us. Let us work together, join the Green Computing Foundation, and let us create more best practices for everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.